I had a chance to watch the film yesterday and found it to be um, unusual and weird and thought-provoking and just like kind of I can't stop thinking about it. And so I'm looking forward to hearing other people's thoughts on it. So thanks again for speaking with me.
Thank you.
Rob, I wanted to start with you. So, in the film, George and the other men take things so seriously, and their little world is so serious, but they're also so ridiculous. And I couldn't help but draw parallels to a lot of these right-wing kind of thought leaders today that we see today. Was that characterization paralleling those real-life figures intentional, and how did you go about conceptualizing that?
For sure, for sure. I think like the way that they're all humiliating themselves with their ridiculousness is one of our great weapons against them. I mean, I think they're just profoundly silly, unfortunately effective, but profoundly silly. And I think especially having the like screen and mirror of Zeke there to take it in and not be moved by it at all. I like the kind of monotone of Zeke's presence. It's almost like whatever happened, wherever he gets to by the end, he was probably ready for at the beginning. And there's not like he's changing very much. It's like their refusal to see how they're being perceived and how silly they are. It's just like making them more and more and more deranged. George, especially, he's like desperate for any kind of validation, and the more he doesn't get it, the more like off the chain he becomes.
Yeah, especially as that film hits that third act, he definitely gets off the chain. Jack, I love how you get to show a different side of your acting repertoire here. You're very animated in other projects like Shazam and It, and here we get to see you excel with like this more introspection and reservation. I thought you were incredible in the film. How does playing Zeke compare to the other characters that you've tackled in your filmography so far?
Um, he's an extraordinary thing. He's remarkable, and playing him was such an experience. It was such a strange experience, like a lightning in a bottle thing. I wouldn't know how to replicate it. There was so much like unsaid, unacknowledged, unconscious, mystical um torture in there somewhere, and I had to, and there was, but it was wonderful, and I was just like staying, I was like underwater the whole time in a really strange cool way, but it was all so pleasant, and I enjoyed every minute, and I loved the challenge of playing Zeke. But you know what, it was actually less of a challenge when I had Rob directing me and I had George, I mean Bill, wow, I keep doing that, Camp and Alexis, um and yeah, it was really awesome.
I'm glad you had that experience. It definitely translates to the viewer.
Yeah.
Rob, there's a line that really stuck out with me that I wanted to ask you about. So Alexis, while driving, I think in like the third act, is with Zeke, and she comments about the road looking different than what it used to look like as a kid, and then she kind of backtracks and says, "Well, actually, it looks the same, but it feels different." And that I feel like that really hit hard, especially in the times that we're in right now. How do you think your film interrogates this idea that Alexis says in that quote in the broader scope of his story and commentary?
I love that moment so much. It's such a critical moment. And it's maybe one where, in a way, the film's about these three generations, and I relate to her the most. We're the most similar in age, and I feel a little like I'm between the two. And am, she follows that up when they get to the parking lot by saying, I just worry that my generation ate all the icing off the cake. And there's something I think about guilt in the way her perception has changed. She is mad at herself for not having seen how dire and obvious the like depravity from the George world is. The whole landscape is marked with it. But when she was a kid, there was a kind of, I don't know, and you shouldn't beat yourself up for that kind of thing, but we all do, for not seeing it sooner or for like being taken with it. I think the like end of history rug was pulled out from under us somewhere in our youth in that generation, and we feel bad for ever having believed it. And I think she's feeling it too. And now when you see the landscape, you see how obvious it all is. And there's something I think in the like love the film has for Zeke, or the like hope that we put in Zeke and the generation he represents, that at least they never believed in that thing.
Mhm.
There's something so thrilling about their capacity because they were never fooled, you know, were like embarrassed in a way that they're so strong, even in their reservation. Like you were talking about Jack's performance, like it has to do almost, he just has to, be just reserve his judgment for George to be like ever deranged. And I'm so impressed by the, and jealous of them seeing it so much sooner.
Yeah, and Jack, I think a lot of that is reflected in your performance too. I was so curious, like as a performer, how that was. Like Bill Camp's performance, there's such like an urgency and anxiety behind him as he's trying to like restore this idyllic image of 20th century America. And then
Yeah.
meanwhile, Zeke is just like the antithesis of that. He's very much in the moment. He's slower. He's kind of nonchalant. How do you see this kind of generational ideological clash between your character and Bill's?
God, for that question. That's awesome. Thank you for that question. uh, I I I I feel like the movie is told through Bill Camp's eyes for a lot of it, maybe, and and I think that the representation of Zeke that's in the film, uh, might not be the objective one. However, because I'm so weird, and I'm like, I feel like I look like I'm caked in makeup, and like I look sort of not in a bad way, but I look sort of uncanny, or strange, and my hair is constantly wet, and my uh rat tail is erect. Very- but I just think I think I'm weird, and I think he's right when he says I'm defective. In a way, I mean, yeah, and then also there's so many things I like when she says that she's eating all that this generation is just eating all the icing on cake, and I say I don't never really like icing anyway. It's sort of so annoying that like for the older generation that like we're so passive and we're practicing when we do talk about the future, we're talking about manifesting something. We're never actually putting pen to paper, and it's there. I mean, it's sort of it's so interesting. And I would be so aggravated to be old. I think about my grandpa, who's a real big boomer. He's 30, he was born in 1936. And how like it's almost like the same feeling as like sitting at your chair looking at the window and you're like, I couldn't jump up right now even if I wanted to. That's so infuriating. And kids do that all the time. And in any course of the world. And I think this movie is really cool because it's not, I mean, it can take place any time. It's almost like Death of a Salesman or something, which I just saw on Broadway, which is awesome. But I was reminded of Ponderosa while watching Death of a Salesman for some reason, and I think it's because there's a I don't know, there's a sad but and nevertheless inevitable success that happens with like uh a comeuppance or like getting away with a lie or like
Mhm.
or like a suicide with a bunch of money. You still won, and
Yeah.
and so both sides I think have like the same thing to say about each other. And it was an honor to sort of be blind in this race, because I guess I walked out of it with a new opinion that I didn't even think I was learning while I was learning it. So that was cool.
That's so interesting. I love how you compare it to Death of a Salesman because I find like that and your film has this like simultaneously timeless quality and very timely quality to it and this like kind of strange juxtaposition. Rob, I wanted to add, I was so interested in like learning more about like the lore and like the ideology behind George and his like overlords or however you want to describe them. But you exercise a lot of restraint there to kind of pull back and not over explain things. But I'm curious, did you develop that excuse me, like further mythology further that maybe in a way that didn't make it to the screen ultimately?
Well, I think one of the reasons that like George's character can sustain for as long, if he was one of the other people from the barbecue who had a better grip on what he believes, he would probably be less interesting. I think one of the most interesting things about George is that he's an imperfect evangelist of whatever it is he believes. And I think that says something more about ideology. Like a lot of those guys uh, would never admit it, but ideology, I think, is often like backfilled. Like you have some emotion, you have some want, and then you take some uh, explanation on that happens to uh, result in you getting what you want. And I think, like a lot of like enlightenment rationality is used and weaponized as rationalization. And I think it's interesting that George is so imperfect and he doesn't know any of those names. And he's like probably confused himself, like what organization he's in and like what they believe ultimately, like what they're trying to do. And really what he wants is just to like, he may genuinely want a son. He just like wishes he had like some camaraderie and community in his life, which he doesn't get that everything he's like fighting for is working to undermine. Like everything he wants, he could have if he just stopped doing what he was doing. But he's instead like ramping up and ramping up and ramping up. And those guys he's with are like the exact wrong people for him to be around.
Yeah, it's so interesting how like he's very goal oriented, but every action he does like takes him further away from
Yeah.
the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
I guess as the last question, just for both of you, this is obviously a film that leaves a lot up for interpretation and kind of, as I said earlier, kind of lingers in the mind afterward. What do you both hope viewers, audiences get from the film, or kind of the impression that they're left with after the credits roll?
I think I don't. Can I be honest with you guys? I actually think that this might be a movie that people need to see like more than more than once or twice because it's like it'll keep evolving and it's really a strange. It's a really awesome achievement on Rob's part. So kudos to Rob for being able to create something that's not like just idiosyncratic or special, or poetic or abstract or avant-garde or whatever, but it's like mushrooms, like or I don't know about those, but I know that like some people have described it when you take mushrooms, each time is sort of different and you learn a new thing. Um, and I feel like that's this movie. It's like a body, it's rather than a piece or something. And I want people to talk about the bracelet that I wear in the film, and I want them to talk about my rat tail, and I want them to talk about Bill Camp and how he's just so good, and how Alexis Bledel is just so great, and how I'm so great.
I you know, I wanted you to feel like defamiliarized with, the films about the like normal and the concept of what's normal and the people who are working so hard to produce that and their sense that it's inevitable or like evident and obvious and objective. And it's so not. And so much of the humor comes from how arbitrary it all is and how ridiculous it is and silly they are. But I think that like defamiliarization feeling is one of the most thrilling you can have in your life when you walk back outside and see things for the first time or stop taking them for granted and be like, wait a second, what? That's how our world works? Like, why?
Yeah, like the opposition of complacency or comfort. Yeah, I really like that perspective. Well, thank you both so much for speaking with me. I am like absolutely fascinated to see what people talk about this. Bless you, Jack. Absolutely fascinated to hear what people talk or and think about the film. So thank you again for taking the time.